So if you've watched any of my videos, you'll know that I enjoy a good cup of coffee in the woods, and that I'll go through the extra steps it takes to make a good cup of coffee. Truth is, I also enjoy a good cup of tea once in a while. In my cook kit, I carry a variety of tea bags, but I also enjoy looking for items in the woods that I know will make a good cup of wild tea. So if you're interested in learning more about wild teas, stay tuned. One of the defining elements of bushcraft is being able to identify, appropriately harvest, and prepare resources found in the woods. This is a process that can take years to master, if that's even possible. Areas of study can include which trees make the best firewood or bow drill sets, which plants can be used as tinder, which plants can be eaten, which plants should be avoided, as well as which plants may have real medicinal value, as well as how to extract that value. It is these last two areas of study that most bushcrafters struggle with. Understandably so. Most people fear consuming something that may be harmful to them if not properly identified. Even if properly identified and prepared, not everyone will react the same way to something they've never eaten before. Most people who get into foraging focus on wild edibles. The truth is, it can be difficult to find sufficient palatable edibles to make a full meal from, although it is possible to find edibles that you can add to an existing meal that you already have. It may be easier to focus on what plants make good teas or which ones have medicinal value. Still, this is not an area of study that should be undertaken lightly. Everyone who would go into the woods and consume something found in nature owe it to themselves to do the research to be able to positively identify the plant they've found. Most bushcrafters are not interested in identifying plants strictly for their medicinal value. It may be interesting to know which plants were helpful if you develop diarrhea, or which plants can be used on an open wound to stop bleeding or prevent infection. The truth is, in the midst of an emergency, you're not likely to run around looking for a plant you may or may not find in your immediate area. For me, identifying the plants I find in the forest provides me with a better sense of connection with nature. That sense of connection can be made more real if the plants I find also make an enjoyable cup of tea. Identifying plants that can be prepared as a cup of tea is a great way to start your education in foraging. The bonus is, some of those teas actually have real medicinal value. Wild teas are something that can give you immediate gratification, and that can be a great motivator for future learning. So for this first video on wild teas, I want to talk about Sweetfern. But rather than try and describe it for you here in my kitchen at home, let's go into the woods and see what it looks like. So I'm only a few minutes away from my car, walking into where I want to start my search for wild edibles, wild teas, wild medicinals. And already I've come across one of my objectives for the day, which is Sweetfern. And there's a Sweetfern right here. And see if I can give you a little bit of a close-up on it. And we'll do some identification of this as well, and we'll talk about its qualities and how it's prepared and how it's used. But one of the things you'll notice about Sweetfern is that even though the individual leaves look very fern-like, it's not actually a fern. And we'll compare it against some bracken or some other ferns that we find along the way. But it's in fact a bush. So if you look down, you can see the stalks, the brown stalks. They do tend to grow in clumps. I understand it's from underground rhizomes and seedlets. And right here you can see some of the nuts starting. It's a seedlet nut growing up. And we'll talk about the medicinals on these, but if you look at it, brown stems out to where each of the individual leaves begin. And if you're not sure, pick one off. Rub it in your hands, smell it. You'll never mistake that smell again. Very strong, very intense, very aromatic. Very nice. So here I have an opportunity to show you why Sweetfern is often confused or called a fern, because right in front of me there's a small patch of bracken fern. And if you look at the individual leaflets on the bracken fern, see the arrangement of the leaflets on each side. I'll compare it against that of the Sweetfern, and you can start to see the similarities. You can see why it would be mistaken for a fern. So once again, it's not a fern, but it is an excellent source of medicinal and enjoyable tea properties, which we'll talk about in a little while. So as you saw in the video, sweetfern prefers to grow in full sunlight in well-drained sandy soils, and it can be quite drought resistant as well. The range where it can be found is mostly on the eastern North America, eastern Canada areas. It will extend into the Midwest. I don't know how much farther west than that'll go, or how much farther south than that will go. You can have a look around and see if you can find it. The history of the sweetfern is quite interesting as well. Our indigenous First Nations people quite often use sweetfern to line the bottom of baskets when they were collecting perishable food items like the wild fruits and wild berries. I know personally that sweetfern can be used to rub on your arms as a means of a natural insect repellent. It's a highly aromatic plant that's related to bayberry and myricagale and a few of the others, and they are also known for that same thing, that they can be used as an expedient bug repellent. Historically, it's quite interesting to note that during the American Revolution, that sweetfern was one of the plants, and we'll discuss a few of the others in later videos, one of the plants that was used as a substitute for tea when the tea was stopped being imported. More recently, in the Depression, when tea was not available again, sweetfern again was one of the ones that was substituted. I guess it was quite common for people to compete, if you will, on what plant combinations they'll put together to have a tea in their own home, and people would go from home to home testing each other's tea substitutes out. So medically speaking, the medicinal value of sweetfern tea, it has a number of claims, but some of the more prevalent ones are it's good for a cure for diarrhea, and externally it can be made into a wash by infusing it, and that can be applied to open skin rashes or to exposure to poison ivy and other irritable plants like that. Now, as I said in the opening of this video, it's your responsibility to go and do the research on this before you consume it or use it for any medicinal purposes. It's quite a relatively easy plant to identify, and it really doesn't have any other lookalikes that could be considered dangerous. As you saw in the video clip, it does have a comparable look to, well, bracken is probably the one that it's most comparable to, but once you see the two plants side by side, you can immediately tell the differences. So I use sweetfern by making just a cup of tea with it. About 4 or 5 of the sweetfern leaves, bruised and crushed up a little bit, and put in a cup of boiling water and let stand for 5-10 minutes. Makes a very nice, light, herbal, aromatic blend. Some people use cream and sugar to it. I don't. I like it just the way it is. You may try it one way and then, add cream or sugar later if you want to try it that way. I'd encourage you to take a look around and see if you can find sweetfern. Confirm that what you're looking at really is sweetfern, but once you do, it's one of those things that you can try. You may like it, you may not. If you do like it, it's something that you can add to other wild teas to make a combination of flavors, and we'll talk more about those in future videos. So if you've enjoyed this video, the first in my series on wild teas, I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any future videos. But in the meantime, get out and explore. Take a look around, see if you can find sweetfern in your area. But take the path less traveled. It will make all the difference. Bye for now.